Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the 3D Vtuber course. For this course we're going to be making kind of like a dummy donut character just to kind of go through the whole pipeline real quick. I know you're thinking, what the heck? We're going through the whole pipeline in one video? Yes we are. And my reasoning behind that is, while this is going to be a very stacked video in terms of knowledge and all that, it can also serve as a good reference point for later on in the course for certain steps we will be doing. So don't be too worried if you see me doing a lot of different stuff in this episode and you're not able to replicate it. It's going to be a lot of information really quick. This is just more or less my style of teaching. I kind of like to show the broad spectrum of what we'll be going through, and then in the latter episodes we'll dive into these topics in more detail. So without further ado, let's get on to making this cursed donut character. And I know what you're thinking, you're like, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to make cute anime waifus. What is this cursed donut man? Well, he has a lot of core principles that are useful for teaching, like modeling, texturing, so we'll be getting into that for this video. I also have a small offshoot video for episode 3 going over some of my hotkeys for Blender as well as some of my quick favorites. If you're very beginner when it comes to Blender, that way we won't waste any more time on this video because it's already going to be a very long one as is. So it's a little offshoot video you can find up here in the tag or in the video description if you want to learn more about the various Blender hotkeys I use when making characters. So let's get into it. Okay, so for our cursed donut guy, we're just gonna press A, hit X to delete everything. We're gonna bring in a torus mesh for the donut, like so. Again, don't be worried if I'm going too fast. We're going to, this is just a broad overview video, just to kind of show you what the process looks like for making these characters. So let me just add some thickness there to the donut. Maybe crank down these segments a little bit. I go over a lot of these tools like proportional editing and stuff in that hotkey video, so if you want to know more about what some of this stuff is, I recommend you check it out if you're really new to Blender. But for some of the intermediate users, I don't want to waste any more of you guys' time and we can kind of get a little bit more into some of the meat of this course. So we're just going to be starting off making a simple donut here. Selecting those faces, Shift D, P to separate those faces, Alt S to scale those faces outward from the normal, like we talked about in the hotkey cheat sheet video. I'm going to turn on my wireframe because I like to sometimes work with wireframe. Let's add a solidify modifier and a subdivision modifier. Yeah, let's add the subdivision afterward. Okay, let's add some droplets. Actually, let's add variation. When making 3D objects, you want to create the imperfections that make it look more realistic. The donut glaze or frosting wouldn't be perfect all the way on top of the donut if it was real life. So add some variation to get that extra detail. we'll go with that. For the donut, let's add the sprinkles. Sprinkles, okay. Sprinkle would look something like this, kind of that pill looking shape, and now you could use geometry nodes for sprinkles, but we won't be going over geometry nodes in this course. But yeah. Press F3, randomize, transform. Let's do rotation Z, just randomize that. Bada bing, bada boom. You got a bunch of random sprinkles. Got a little bit manual labor here. You got to place some. Okay, let's add some of those circle sprinkles. We're going to use an icosphere for that. Ta-da! That's gonna be it, I think, for the model. Actually, let's add in a little, like a little bake line for the donut here. Like a little. Is this on the original donut tutorial? They add this little divot. Little divot. Something like that. And maybe one on the inside. Is there. That's a tasty looking donut if I ever seen one. Wow. So that's going to be it for the modeling phase of this video. Okay, now that we got the modeling out of the way, let's go on to the rigging, as that is usually the next step I go to in the pipeline, is I do the rigging. But first, well, for this instance, we might do the UV unwrapping first. Yeah, let's do the UV unwrapping first. So to do that, I'm gonna bring out this side panel here. Just you'll see it brings up this cursor, and then I just drag to the right, and it opens this window up. We're gonna open our editor type, go to UV editor. Now for these shapes, I'm not gonna bother unwrapping these these shapes here, because they're just going to be a flat color in the textures, so there's no point really unwrapping those. Yeah, let's just select all the circle sprinkles, and we're gonna shrink that down because we don't need that taking up a lot of space. Everything on here is pretty much going to be basic flat colors. We're not going to go crazy at all with the shading. The same with the sprinkles. A lot of these are going to be flat, although we'll probably have these be different colors. So we will unwrap these. These already have an opening in the back, so not really a point in making any seam cuts for them. So I just press A, then I hit U, and I hit unwrap, and then it wraps them. We'll just put them up here. Same with this guy, no point making any cuts because the back side, if I isolate, the back side's already open. So just A, U, we get something like that. The donut, let's make a cut in the middle for the donut. Mark the seam, press A, U, unwrap, and we get 2 halves of the donut. Now if we select everything, make sure this guy, press L, deselect, L, deselect. Let's make sure that. Make sure that's turned off. Make sure this guy's on the bottom right. We got both halves of our donut. We got the frosting unwrapped. Bing, bang, boom. Very basic UV map for the donut. I'm not too worried about spacing of these UVs, as it's not going to matter too much because a lot of this stuff is going to be just flat coloring. Might shrink this a little bit. Individual origins, just a little bit. Okay, and what I usually do, bump my tape there. What I usually do after I unwrap all these UVs, I pin them. That way I don't accidentally hit unwrap again. It won't move them, because if they're pinned, they won't move. It's just good practice so you don't accidentally mess up your UVs later. So that's the UVs unwrapped for the donut. Very basic, not too hard. Okay, now let's actually make the character, the donut, Cursed Donut Man. Now, what would Cursed Donut Man look like? I'm actually going to combine all these meshes. That way we have one mesh. Let's call this Donut. Donut. Okay. And just gonna rotate them. Oop. Rotate them 90 degrees. Oop. Let's make our origin point the center of this mesh, and rotate them. Am I facing the wrong way? Okay, so let's just rotate them and let's start building this donut dude. All these objects are going to share the same UVs, so the character is going to have the same kind of looking donuts for the arms and legs. Now what I do for VTuber models, a lot of the clients are women, so the average height for a woman according to Google is 1.63 meters. So I just bring out my measuring tool, I measure 1.63, kind of line that up. That way our character won't be giant once we bring it into Unity. Right, and let's grab the donut and kind of move it down. I'm gonna mark it with pencil, holding D, just kind of drawing right there. That way I know where the top is when I select my selecting tool. And not really center, so I'm gonna do that. There we go. what I did was I hit Shift F, selection the cursor, and move to there. Then I just bring it up with GZ. So there's the head of Donut Man, and maybe the neck. Yeah, should the neck be this way? Yeah. Neck, chest, spine, hips, and let's do legs like this. Like I said, he's gonna be very cursed. Oop. Alright, legs. This should be a little bigger. Bet you didn't think we were going to be making this absolute abomination for this course, but it's very useful to know how to do this type of stuff. There's his foot, and we're going to combine all these. We're just going to call this well, let's smear this first. Oh yeah, this character is gonna be sick. We'll just use a normal torus for the arms. This donut didn't get fully baked or something, or didn't get the sprinkles. That's what we'll say. For the fingers, let's do like a donut hole or something. Something like that, maybe. There we go. Got a really long arm. Let's select that. Kind of just join those. Mirror it. Control A, apply transforms. And that is our character. Now for these parts we do have to unwrap these. These are going to need some textures too. Do the same for the donut holes. Just select the middle there. Again, I should have unwrapped these before I duplicated them. My bad. They are just going to be a quick scuffed character though, nothing crazy. Now all of our UVs are unwrapped. And let's combine all these meshes. So we have one. Oop, I forgot the mirror. What I usually end up with is just the body mesh and the head mesh at the end. These are mirrored, so we're not gonna combine them yet until we do the rigging. Just call these arms for now. Legs for now. Body. Well, let's call this donut body. And this, the head, has a specific naming convention for MMD capabilities later on, so you have to name it exactly like this. You have to name it body with the other letters lowercase. It's weird that you have to name the head body, but for MMD Blendshapes to be detected on the head, you have to name it this name body. Kind of weird. Okay, so now, let's select these all. Control A, apply transform. There we go. We now have our character mesh. 191 triangles. That's kind of a lot, but for demonstration purposes, not too bad. And they're about 1.63 meters tall. Average height of a woman, according to Google. So now that we have the UVs unwrapped and the character blocked in, let's begin the rigging. Okay, I didn't like how long the arms were, so I shortened them a little bit. Okay, so let's begin the rigging phase. Excuse me. So what you want to do is grab a single bone here, and the viewport settings I like to have for the bones is this. Go to viewport display under this little running man here. Click in front, that way you always see the bones in front of the mesh. Go to object properties, viewport display, set it to wire, that way it doesn't get in the way too much of the mesh. So let's start by adding the hip bone, and place it roughly like that. Now let's extrude the spine bone and extrude the chest bone. Now local people tend to have like this bend in like their spine and stuff. I would have it look kind of something like that. Whoop. Something like this. But Donut Man is just straight, so. The neck bone, the head bone. Now, very important thing for the leg bones. I'm gonna hit Alt F here, flip it. Something very important for the leg bones is that this point doesn't go above this point here, otherwise it can cause issues for full body tracking later on. So let's not do that. And normally the knees have somewhat of a bend like this. A little bit. Foot bone. And the toe bone. Like that. Make sure you select this, select the hips, Control P. That way the leg bone is parented to the hip bone, and you can tell you did it right is if you see this dashed line to the hip bone. Next, we got the arms. Select that bottom point. Actually, select the bottom point here. Shift S, cursor to selected. Select the top. Shift S, selection to cursor. It'll move to the point. Then we hit G, X. Then bring out that shoulder bone. And this is going to be the axis of rotation, this bone on the end. So that if the shoulder were to rotate, it would rotate based on this point here. Select the shoulder, parent it to the chest. Keep offset. You can know you did it right if you see the parent line there. Arm bones. And let's make this center. Hand bone, fingers. Actually lined up pretty good actually. I don't really gotta adjust those fingers that much. Let's turn on vert snapping. Snap it to there. And let's snap it to this point. Yeah, might as well do that for these ones too. That way we're perfectly center. Bone orientation is very important. Next to weight painting. Or some might argue that bone positioning is probably more important than weight paints. Is the position of the bone dictates where it will rotate from by these little end knobs here. Very important. I'm gonna select these fingers, parent it to the hand. Select them. Select these all again. Divide them twice, like so. Got finger bones now. Now we gotta name the bones. If you want, you can click on the running man again. You can turn on names to see the names of the bones. Yeah, well, we should be able to see them. I don't know why they're not showing. Well, that should work. You should see white names next to the bones when you press this button. I'm not sure why it's not working. Let's see real quick. Weird. Not sure why that's not working. But we're gonna ignore that for now. Let's name the bones. Call this head, neck, chest, spine, hips, upper, underscore, leg, underscore, L. Now it's very important that you use underscore L or dot L at the ends of these bones, because Blender uses this naming convention to be able to mirror the bones over to the other side if you name them with the underscore L. Really nice feature that Blender has for rigging. I'm gonna lower this point a little bit, it's kind of close. Upper leg L, lower leg L, foot L, toe L, Shoulder, let's call it shoulder. Oh. Shoulder L. Upper arm L. And now that I think of it, I think I don't include the dash for this part. Camel case for that. Lower arm L. And L. Whoops. Pretty sure it has to be uppercase. Otherwise, I don't think the mirroring works if it's lowercase. Oh, I called that. Oops. Now I'm going to use the simple renaming panel for stuff like this. Search for bone, replace it with thumb. Oops, sorry. Gotta make sure that's set to bone. There we go. Which, and you can also do this. Trim the end. Oops. Really hoping I could get rid of the dot there. Let's try this. Okay, well. I goofed up a little bit there. I'll just do this manually. It'll be a little easier. I only really use the simple renaming panel for like hair bones and stuff. I recommend using this same naming convention I'm using. Sometimes some programs have it set to where they look for these specific bone names to do certain stuff within their programs. Okay, and like I said, you're supposed to be able to see those. Maybe I turned something off. That's why. I turned text info off, that's why I wasn't showing. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we have all our bones named. We have the upper leg parented to the hips, the left shoulder parented to the chest, the finger bones parented to the hand. So then we can select the whole armature by pressing A and hit symmetrize. And what Blender did was it read the underscore L in those names and it mirrored them. Now for demonstration purposes, to show you that I'm not lying, if I were to use no L, these would not mirror over when I hit symmetrize. You can see those two bones did not mirror over. The underscore L is very important. Let's do a quick test to see if lowercase l works. Okay, yeah, lowercase l does work. I still like using uppercase L though. Just an OCD thing. Okay. Alright, now we have our full rig. The bones blocked in. Now, what we want to do is select all of our meshes. What I did was I select that, then I shift select the bottom one here. And then we're going to shift select last the rig, Control P with empty groups. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start weight painting these donuts to the rig. So first I'm going to select the bones, then I'm going to select the mesh. We're going to start with the torso. And I control tab and I go into weight paint mode. Now you can see I control click and I do some painting, and if I control click on another bone, that weight paint won't be there. This is the weight paint that would be on the chest bone. Now I can control click between bones, and it's very important you always make sure you control click on the bone before you start working, because accidentally sometimes this bone gets selected up above and then it turns out you were weight painting using the neck bone. Always make sure you're on the proper bone when you're weight painting certain areas. Now you can see I'm like, alright, I'm weight painting the chest here, that's not so bad, but like, oh wait, man, I got all this bleed through over on the spine portion of the mesh. Now what you can do is you can select meshes, and you can select meshes in edit mode, and then you can press this button here and it locks your selection to just that mesh rather than overpainting on other meshes. Really useful feature instead of just this. Now my preferred settings when weight painting looks something like this. I paint with a full strong fall off, so that looks something like that. And I also where is it? I usually use projection when I paint. And what projection does, here it is. What projection does is it paints through the mesh. By default, you can see it doesn't go through the other side. If I turn on projected, if I turn on projected and I turn off front faces, it will go through the whole mesh. But front faces needs to be turned off too. If it was just sphere, it wouldn't go through. It needs projection and front faces turned off. What else? We will be using mirror vertex group. There's specific use cases in which you use topology mirror, but by default, we're going to use the basic mirror vertex groups, not topology mirror. Another thing we'll talk about later on is auto normalize. We won't talk about it for this simple mesh, but that will be a future thing we go over. Can be handy in certain cases, but if used properly. So yeah, let's lock the selection to this chest donut here. Okay, got the chest donut, and I'm gonna you can also do this mode where it locks the vertex. I just think it's easier viewing in this mode. You can see the other ones are kind of like more they're like more faded out. That means they're not selected in the selection. And now I'm just gonna weight paint. Nope, make sure mirror is enabled. Doesn't look like it's mirroring, so weight paint that donut. Make sure it has full influence. And you can see, and we got the chest donut moving. And now we're just gonna do the same thing for the other parts of the mesh. And like I said, I'm on the chest bone right now. If I press the mask, I can't control click and select other bones. This has to be turned off first. Then control click onto the spine bone. Then turn it back on. That is the kind of workflow for that. These aren't perfectly symmetrical meshes, so that's why it's not mirroring, I believe. You'll find real quickly that Blender, its mirroring system is kind of funky. It can cause a lot of annoying issues sometimes. Turn that off. Control click the hips bone. Paint that. Make sure I'm saving every once in a while, just in case there's a crash. And you can see we got the spine, the chest, and the hips following along with the bones now. Let's do the neck. Oop, you can see right there, I accidentally painted with the neck on, which brings me to another good topic. You can see I'm pressing Control F to turn the influence from 0 to 1. If I turn it to 0, it makes it an eraser. And I can erase that. Here we go. Same deal for the leg bones. Now I like to model with the mirror modifier on, because sometimes if you have the mirror modifier applied, Blender's mirroring doesn't always work for the weight paints. It can be a little funky, so I recommend whenever you rigged the base body to have the mirror modifier on. That way once you apply it afterward, all the weights are 100% mirrored. So let's get the legs here. Now, something to note is once you, if you were to apply weights using this menu here, the vertex groups weight menu, by default it doesn't mirror it automatically to the other side. Weight paints get mirrored via the brush. So if I were to like apply weights using this menu, it's not going to mirror it over to the other side. It's only getting mirrored in this case because we have a mirror modifier on. Something I forgot to mention is that for the thumb bones, I like to have axis on for the rig. For the thumb bone, I like to make it to where the Z is pointing more outward. So go into edit mode, kind of hit Control R, and then to make sure it's more pointed outward like that. And you can test to see if all the finger bones are moving. If I change to individual origins and I do RXX, you can see everything. Whoops. You always want to make sure this is on. I forgot to turn that on before we added that bone roll in, so let me just fix that really quick. Make sure that followed. Yep. Now let's try the finger bones again. RXX. You can see works like a real hand. Might turn the pivot of the thumb a little bit, just a smidge, where it's going more inward. Something like that. Feels more natural. We can test the whole arm like this. That way we make sure it is rigged properly. And that should cover the rigging phase. And what I like to do after the fact is I select the hip bone and move the model around to make sure no mesh gets left behind. You can also select all the bones, hit RXX, and have it do these different dances to see if everything is moving as intended. Alt-R, S-G. That covers the rigging portion of this episode. Okay, next we're going to be going over the texturing portion of this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the image viewport. Let's change the paint. I'm going to open the UV editor. I'm going to open an image from my desktop. Gonna grab this donut here. Just for reference, for colors. Okay, let's hop into the material viewport and let's start painting. So, let's start with the head. Let's go into texture paint mode. And what I'm going to do is make a new material by going to the material tab. We're just going to call it donut matte. And if you have the UCU paint plugin installed properly, you can see this button. We're going to press that, set to emission. We're going to press new. I work in 4K, then I usually take my textures down to 2K. Let's call this donut flats. These will be the flat colors of our layer. Since there's going to be no transparency on this texture, it's usually a good idea to make sure you have the whole texture filled out. That way the seams won't be visible from farther away. And what I mean by that is this. Let's see. Actually, wrong tool. So, for example, if we don't fill in that whole texture with the color, you can see from farther away, you can kind of see white outline here, and that is no bueno. We don't want that. So the way to get around that is you usually have to fill in the whole texture sheet with the most prominent color that's going to be on V donut, and there's no visible white line there. So as you can see, since I filled out that whole texture sheet with the one color, we don't have that visible seam anymore. The masking, just how it works in weight painting mode, works the same for painting. If I have these meshes selected in edit mode, it will lock them to where those are the only things that can be painted on in texture paint mode. So I'm just going to select these sprinkles here, make these ones blue. Now, another nice thing about UCU paint is you can have it do these bakes for you. We're gonna try and see an ambient occlusion bake. If you have a potato PC, you might want to run with these default settings, but I'm gonna set it to 2K and run a bake. Now what this is going to do is, what ambient occlusion is, whoop. What happened here? Oh, okay. So before I do an ambient occlusion bake, I want to make sure it's only going to be using the head mesh when it's doing its bake. So to do that, make sure you have this, you bring in this render drop down by enabling it. By default, it's just going to look like this. Bring this render, what is being rendered button, enable that. I'm going to turn off everything except for the head. Doesn't matter for the armature. And then we're going to do another bake. I don't know, I'm not going to lie, I kind of almost like the last pink we had. We add a little bit more saturation. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Now you can check out what other bake options they have. Something important to note with UCU paint is you'll see this asterisk. And if you were to just quit and leave Blender, that means this image it's not going to be saved. So if I press Ctrl S, save the file, you can see that means that it stores the image file within the Blender file. Because by default, the way Blender's texture painting system works is, in the old days, if you didn't assign a fake user to the image, Blender wouldn't save your texture painted images when you close the software. The nice thing about this plugin is that you don't have to do that anymore, and it does it automatically for you. It keeps the textures within the project. Very nice feature. We're gonna call this good, actually, for the texture, I think. So what you can do then is go to bake all channels. You can bake all channels, and like I said, all these textures are 4K, but I bring them down to 2K. so that the performance on the model is much better. 2K is not bad. There we go. Something more like that. That's what we were looking for. So that takes care of the texturing part of the model. So we have our textures, we have the model, it's rigged. What next? Next we have the blend shapes. We're not going to do a full AR kit obviously on this guy, but I think what could be funny is if we do one of the 52 AR kit blend shapes for this character. And the way you do that is you would, let's close these windows first. You would select the head mesh here. I'm just going to isolate it by hitting the slash on numpad, since we're only going to be working with the head. And so let's just do what we did before. And this time let's put it on a separate shape key. And you're going to go to basis, select the whole mesh, control V, hit blend from shape, and you're going to select key 2. Now for draw open, we're going to select the whole thing, control V, key 2, make it -1. That way that's what opens the mouth. So when you talk and you open your mouth, it's going to look like this. Very cursed, but that's all we're going to cover for the blend shape portion of this step. So now we have everything we need to move on to Unity. We have a character mesh. We unwrapped the UVs. We textured it. We rigged it. It has a face blend shape. We are ready to go for Unity. So let's get on to the Unity step of this episode. Now, before we head on to Unity, we got to go over the export settings we'll use for our character to bring it into Unity. And another good thing to do, it's just some good practice if you ever wanted to share the file amongst friends. You want to go to external data and hit pack resources. And what that does is it packs all the texture files inside the blend file for when you share it with your friends. Because by default, if you were to just hand them the Blender file, it wouldn't come with the textures included. And you can also go to Blender file, just clean up, remove images you don't need. I don't need that, don't need that, don't need that anymore. Delete those. Materials, let's get rid of that. Material. So with that done, we are also going to now combine the arm. Oh, let's apply the mirror modifier first, because before you bring your character into Unity, all your meshes can't have any modifiers on it except the armature modifier. Don't apply this one. Because if you bring your character mesh into Unity with a mirror modifier, stuff will break and it won't work properly. So make sure that those are applied before the character is brought into Unity. Only armature modifier. So let's join the arms to the body, Control J, join the legs to the body, Control J, and let's just call this donut body. And like I said earlier, the head has to be named body. It's just the naming convention that MMD uses for their blend shapes. This character doesn't have any MMD blend shapes, but the Vtuber model we'll make later will have those. So just good practice getting used to it. Just good practice to get used to it. Always name the head body. Now select everything in the scene. Just Control A, apply all the transforms to get rid of any weirdness. We want all the transforms looking like this, you know, scale 1, stuff like that. Yeah, you know you did properly if your origin point is at the center of the scene. If your cursor's off somewhere, you can hit Shift C. Your bones, should have a scale of 1. Any other value could cause some weirdness in Unity. And I sometimes like to double check, make sure everything's still working on the rig. Cool. Working as intended. And Alt-R, Alt-S, Alt-G to reset the rotation, scale, and transform of the bones in pose mode. And you can get there by hitting Control-Tab. Like so. So now, select everything. Go to Export. Export FBX. And I'm just going to export this to my desktop. And you're going to want to use these same settings that I do here. Click that, click that. This is supposed to bake the textures into the model. I find it doesn't always work in Unity, but you want copy and you want embed textures enabled. Selected objects in the scene that we selected, those are what we're going to be exporting. Because if this is turned off, then it exports everything in the scene, like lights and other stuff you might have in the scene. Selected objects only exports what I selected with my cursor out of the scene. We don't have any animations, let's turn that off. Go to armature, add leaf bones. We'll talk more about leaf bones later, but you want this off for now. Apply scalings, you want this set to FBX all. And let's call this Cursed Donut Man, and let's export him. Shouldn't take too long. He's exported. Now we're going to start the Warudo conversion part of this course. So go ahead and navigate to your Unity hub over here. Open that up. Something I forgot to mention in the last plugins and programs video is you want to go to this website to download the Warudo SDK. You can find the SDK file via this link here. I'll leave a link in the description for mine just in case, as well as this link here. It tells you how to download the Warudo SDK. So once you have the Warudo SDK, it'll look something like this. I keep mine in a Unity plugin folder right here. You don't want to unzip it once you have it. So you just Control C, copy it, and let's make a new folder called Cursed Donut Warudo. And then you take that zip folder you copied, you paste it into the Warudo folder, then you extract it inside this work folder here. And it should give you a bunch of different files here. Delete the zip. Close that, and then you're gonna go to add, and once you hit add, you're gonna navigate to that folder you made, click it, and hit open, and that'll take a couple minutes for it to load and do its thing. So once Unity finally decides to load, drag and drop your FBX into the scene. See, we have our donut guy here. I like to usually create a work folder for the character. That way we can keep everything inside here. Call it Cursed Donut Man. Drag them into there. And I also create a material folder. I just call it mats. And I create a texture folder. Textures, and I also do an animation folder, but this guy is not going to have any animations on him, so we'll just leave it to these two for now. I also create a VRM folder and a Warudo character folder. So what you want to do first is drag and drop him into this hierarchy so he appears in the scene. Press F so you can zoom in on him. Unity navigation is hold right click and use the WASD keys. And if you scroll on your mouse wheel, you can see you have this value going up and down. The lower the number, the slower you'll move around in the scene. So right click, WASD to move, F to center on your object. So click your object here in the asset drawer, go to model, and turn on read write. Enable legacy blend shape normals. I like to use area weighted. Go to rig, check humanoid, apply, go to configure, make sure chest is in chest bones, spine is in spine, hips are in hips. Sometimes Unity does a pretty good job of finding the bones, but sometimes you'll find that it doesn't find your bones. So sometimes you need to click this dot and navigate to and hit apply on the proper bone. I messed it up. Let me go to chest. Shoulders, feet, toes, head. We don't want a jawbone, so always select that and hit backspace to delete the jawbone. This character doesn't have eye bones, so we don't have to worry about that. The hands are already taken care of, has all the proper finger bones. I like to then hit enforce T-pose, apply, done. That's the rig setup. We don't have any custom animations, so don't worry about this tab. Go to materials, hit extract materials, and navigate to that material folder you made. Select this folder to extract our materials. In this case, Donut Man only had one. Next thing we want to do is we want to bring in our Poyomi shader plugin. So in the second video, I told you to download a Poyomi shader plugin for Unity. I have mine in here. I'm just going to drag and drop it, the Unity package, into the scene. And this will let me use the Poyomi shader. And it'll bring up this menu for you. And just hit all, import. Okay, so now we have the Poyomi shader folder here imported into our scene. Let's go back to our character folder. Let's drag in our donut texture we saved. I saved mine to my desktop. I'm just gonna drag and drop it here. We have the donut texture. I always usually just check this by default anyway for every material. Alpha is transparency. If you have any transparent section on your texture, just good force to have it. I set it to 4K and high quality compression, apply. Now this is only a 2K texture, but you know, it's saying like if 4K is the max it could utilize from it. It won't change the size. If I were to set 2K, still going to be the same thing. It's just good force to have it. You know, if you do have a 4K texture, it'll use this as the max value for it. So good to get in the habit of that. Now let's go to our Poyomi shader. By default, it's standard. Let's go to Poyomi. I always use outline early. I have the pro version, so you might have Poyomi outline, but same deal. Bring this color value to white. Select the donut texture. So donut. You can see there's the texture on our character here, and that's going to be it for the texture setup on this character. Very basic. We could go a little fancy. We could give him a little outline. Why not? For Warudo, you want to use world outlines. I'm debating if I want to give him white outlines or black. Could also make it to where it uses the color of the texture itself, but a little darker version of it. I kind of like that. I'm also going to use, this is a pro feature for the shader, so you won't have this button. But like I mentioned earlier in the last video, I highly recommend getting the pro version of Poyomi as it has some really nice features. And I'm just gonna see if I like this or not. Oop. I think I like that. Brings out the shadows a little bit more. Yes, add a rim light maybe. I'm gonna invert that. And I'm gonna turn that way down with the intensity. Let's actually change the width. Let's turn that way down. You can go as toony as you want with these lighting. I made it more sharp. Turn that off. Okay. So you can see when I kind of move around a little bit, the highlight changes a little bit. Maybe we'll add a backlight too. Backlight can be nice. Like I said, I wasn't gonna get too fancy, and now I'm pressing on the buttons. I think I'll just use default settings for the backlight. Yeah. Now, once you're done messing with settings on your Poyomi shader, always want to make sure you press lock in. Otherwise, once you go to export, if it's unlocked, once you export it, you'll just have pink materials on the mesh and it won't save. So always hit lock in. So that is the character setup in Unity. Now we're ready to export them as a VRM and then export them to Warudo. So what I do next is I go click the VRM, export to VRM. I'll just call him Cursed Donut Man, version 1.0.0. Me as the author. I'm not going to bother putting my contact information down since this isn't for a client. If you're working on a VTuber commission, I always put the live 2D artist under the reference information here. Check the export settings, make sure post freeze is ticked. Hit export, navigate to the VRM folder we created, and save. Let's leave that name as it is. Now, why we're exporting it as VRM is so that it can normalize the bones. We'll talk more about bone normalization later and why it's a good idea to do that. So if I drag the VRM model in, you can see if I hide the FBX, I'm going to call this FBX. If I hide the FBX, you can see the VRM one looks like crap. VRM only supports very few shaders. I think it's like 3 different shaders it supports, like M-Tune and stuff. VRM doesn't support Poyomi. It's kind of a bummer, but that's not going to matter because this is going to turn into a Warudo format in just a sec here. We only use the VRM to normalize the bones, so to save some time, so that way we don't have to check the settings again. I'm gonna go to my materials folder and just drag and drop the donut material onto this VRM model. So we're back to where we were. Next, we're gonna go to Warudo, this drop in here. Press go to mod set or new mod first. And I'm going to navigate to where I have this Warudo folder. I'm going to call it Cursed Donut Man. Have it create a mod. This is where it'll save the Warudo character file to. We want to go to mod settings now. And I'm the mod author. Cursed Donut Man version 1.0.0. If you have a like a thumbnail for the avatar you want to use, you can drag and drop it here in this box here. Let's just see. We'll just use the texture. Cursed Donut Man 3 a.m. Next, you want to have the export directory. So we'll get that by opening the folder in Warudo. Remember, to be able to open Warudo, you have to have Steam turned on first. So let's do that real quick. We want to open the character folder, and it'll bring up this folder here. We're going to copy this link, go back to Unity, paste that link here to where it saves in that directory. Next, we're going to duplicate this character, hide this one, and now we're going to double check, make sure our material is locked. It is. Then we're going to go to Warudo and hit setup character. And what that did was it brought this character into this folder here. Then after that's set up, you hit build mod. And make sure before you hit build mod, you save your scene in Unity. Because if you don't, it will erase everything in your hierarchy. So we're just going to save real quick, and I double check, do another save. Then I select the prefab, then I hit build mod. If I didn't save, it would have wiped everything here. So it's going to build, it'll bring it into Warudo. We'll look at it real quick in Warudo, then we'll head over to VR chat. And yeah, there he is. Your very own, very first Warudo avatar. Took a little bit, but not too shabby. Okay, and now for the final part of this video on how to upload your character to VR chat. Let's go over that. So first, you want to create a folder for your VR chat avatar. I'm going to call it Cursed Donut VR chat. Close that. Next, you want to go to the creator companion that I told you to download in the last episode. Click it. Then you want to go to create new project. Select avatars 2022. Let's call it Cursed Donut Man. And then pick the folder we made. Then hit create project. After your project is created, you can choose what packages to include within the project. I always like to include Gesture Manager. Sometimes VR Chat Fury modular avatar is good if you want to add outfits and stuff, or other avatar tools. What else? I think for this video we'll just go with gesture manager and the avatar 3.0 manager. Then we'll open the project. Okay, so once the Unity finally decides to load, we're going to do the same thing we did for the Warudo format. We're going to drag and drop our FBX file into the asset drawer right here. After you have the FBX inside Blender, go ahead and drag it into the scene like that. Press F, right click to move around like before, right click in WASD. Same thing as Warudo format. We want read write on. We want legacy blend shape normals, area weighted, apply. Go to rig, go to humanoid, apply, and configure it. Make sure all the bones match up. There you do. Then enforce T-pose, apply, done. Let's make a folder for this guy real quick before we extract the materials. Call it cursed donut. Mats. Textures. And for VR chat, I also have the animation folder, and I have a VR chat menu folder. We won't talk so much about that for this video. We'll talk more about that toward the end of the course once we set up the actual character for VR chat. So we're just going to put this guy into VR chat. He won't have any VR chat toggles at the moment. That'll be for later. But I do like to create a separate folder for that, just so you know. No custom animations. Extract the materials into the materials folder like Warudo. And even to save a lot of time, you could just export the Cursed Donut package from the Warudo file to the VR chat file to save time. But for practice sake, we'll have you set it up again just like we did for Warudo, just so that you get in the flow of doing this. Let's bring in our texture. Alpha is transparency, 4K, high quality, apply. Let's drag and drop our Poyomi shader plugin. Also bear in mind that for VR chat, it doesn't use Magica Cloth physics. They have their own physics system. So if you bought Magica Cloth like I recommended in the previous video, just bear in mind that I said it only works in Warudo format and not for VR chat format. VR chat has a different physics bones system. So now let's go to VR chat SDK, show control panel, drag and drop this window in the top right here. Use your login. After you log in, you can have your cursor over the builder tab, but for now we're just going to be on the inspector. Let's set up our material real quick. Poyomi, outline early, go to colors, turn it to full white, select the donut texture. Oop, there we go. I'm not going to bother setting up the other settings we did for the Warudo, but you can if you want. So lock in that material, click on your Donut Man prefab, hit add component, VR chat, avatar descriptor, press edit on these little orb here. This is going to be kind of where our character sees on the avatar, so kind of place it in on eye level of where the avatar would be looking if you had a VR headset on. I think right about there is pretty good. He doesn't have any VR chat voice themes for talking, so we're going to leave that blank. He doesn't have any eyeballs, we'll leave that blank for now. We'll talk about playable layers later on. Leave the lower body tab alone. Don't mess with the expressions. And yeah, that's all we need is the VR chat avatar descriptor. Then go to builder. Call him Cursed Donut Man. Cursed Donut Man. You can give a thumbnail image for the avatar if you want. That way, this is the thumbnail you'll see once you're in VR chat for when you select the avatar. Press autofix on the map textures. So you do need a thumbnail before you do online publishing. I'm gonna use this this drawing somebody drew my server for the icon. Let's turn transparency on for that. This will be our thumbnail for the character. Go back to the builder, select thumbnail. What was that called actually? Donut Madge. And that was under textures. Before we publish the avatar, let's save our scene. Let's create a scenes folder. Call it scenes. Save as. Cursed Donut. Now let's go to build and publish. Okay, so after the build is run, you can go to Content Manager. You can make the avatar public to where people in VR chat worlds can copy the avatar off you. If you if you don't want to have the avatar copied off you, you can make it private. Although something I do have to mention is even though you do have your avatar marked as private, there are avatar rippers out there that can still bypass this, so do be careful anytime you do go to public worlds with an avatar you don't want people copying. So I'm gonna make him public, and now we just gotta boot up VR chat and take a look at the avatar from there. So once you're in VR chat, you can press R on your keyboard you can press escape, bring up avatars, go to the uploaded tab and press on the avatar you uploaded and click change into avatar. And as you can see, we're now perfectly in VR chat. That's gonna conclude episode 3. It's a lot to cover, so don't be afraid if you aren't able to get this far in the video. It's just more so a good reference guide of what is to come for later in the course. So no worries. I'll see you guys in episode 4.